My Gavanen Melonin, and well met indeed. I am Arachir Galadirthan, and welcome back to Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, as I bring you another diplomacy game. Now, as the nations are all getting set up, let's talk through this. So first of all, how was this game created? Well, all of the people playing in this game did so through the Discord channel that is now bespoke for my channel. It's called the Order of the Swan. It's linked in the video description. And you're welcome to come along and join us if you would like to. A diplomacy game is by its nature one in which no one starts allied to anyone. It is a very good way of leveling the playing field when you have people of all skill levels. Because, of course, otherwise, in team games, if one team is stacked and the other isn't, they are going to win. And it's very difficult to judge whose skill level matches up to whom's and to thereby make balanced teams. So long ago, we settled on, for our sort of bigger game-playing events, we play diplomacy so that everyone can get involved. There are a few rules. The first, you can only be allied, actually allied, to one other person. You can, however, be neutral with as many as you like. And we do frequently get situations where people enter into non-aggression pacts and they, in essence, they form unofficial alliances. And whilst it's not massively welcomed and a little frowned upon, some people do it. And Ginge, I am looking at you. And but otherwise you can only have one ally. The other is, since time immemorial, we've always played these without cannon galleons, so no one is allowed to train cannon galleons. Originally that rule was put in place to protect those who aren't particularly good, because a lot of diplomacy maps are actually very heavily naval, and they would settle on islands thinking, brilliant, I'm on an island, and then a better player would come over with 10 cannon galleons and they're out of the game, job done. Which isn't very good. We like these to be inclusive, people to actually just have fun. This is not about being the best. Although they do tend to go that way a little later afterwards. We also, generally speaking, don't let you have spies, so that if someone has managed to sneak away and survive while the other 7 players are still fighting, it gives them a little bit of a chance to actually survive and not be hunted down like prey to the others. So we don't get spies. And otherwise, that's about it in terms of the rules, and unless I'm missing one grand one, but I don't think I am. The map that we're playing on today was created by Earendil, who is the red fellow down in the bottom, and this is just one of his map creations, and we generally always play with a pop cap of about 350, sometimes 325, sometimes 375, sometimes even less, but we try and cap it out about 300 to 350, because otherwise the lag becomes unbearable. So that's the backdrop. No one's allied to anybody. We all started in transport ships down here, and we all headed out into the world and set up where we wanted to set up. So let's run you through today's players in the grand game of Age of Empires diplomacy. I am Galadirthan. I am the Magyars, which I believe is how you actually pronounce that in Hungarian, or in, I suppose, whatever, do they call their own language that as well? But everyone else, of course, would call that Magyar. We all went random, and I was just quite lucky, to be honest, that I got one of the factions I actually do play as fairly regularly. I like the Magyars, and I was pleased to get them. I sailed north as much as I could, which is why I am bottom score at the moment. I didn't settle quickly, so I'm catching up to the rest who settled immediately, whereas I sailed all the way up here and then built my town centre in this lovely little vale, this lovely little clearing, and have started gathering the sheep and whatnot. Usually in diplomacy games there is an abundance of fish, and it's often the best method of obtaining food. But in this one there's not too much fish, but I've managed to sneak my way into a little lake, a little pond, and start whoring out the world's resources. Away to my west we have Brasidas. Brasidas is one of the highest ranking members of the Discord, and ranks in the Discord just mean moderator status or not. So the people at the very top have the most powers, and the people at the very bottom have the least. And then we give them fancy names because I always like the Order to have a sort of faux medieval society bend. And Brasidas is one of the top ranking people. He's been here since the absolute beginning. He's arguably my biggest fan, although you'll never catch him saying that, but he watches a lot of my videos even now, 7 years later, and he's an absolutely cracking fellow, and he's very good, is something that you should bear in mind. We haven't played with Brasidas as much of late, but whenever we do, it's always good fun, and Brasidas is one who I would say is someone you want to try and ally in this game. Is probably the way I would describe it. Moving around, we have Bono. Now, Bono has played with us a few times. He's playing as the Bohemians. Oh, sorry, I didn't say. Brasidas is the Vikings, and he lamented that fact a great deal. And the first, I would say, 5 to 10 minutes of this game was spent with Brasidas just moaning non-stop that random gave him Vikings. And, of course, everyone then chimed in and said, yes, definitely, no, you're completely right, yes. And those of us that don't know the game 100% were kind of just nodding along. But I appreciate, obviously, Vikings are a water civ, and this is not a water map. But, I mean, you're still not out of the game. Diplomacy, anything can happen. So, and that's... It doesn't matter who you play, really. Everyone can do something. But with the likes of Mats and Griffin here, as we'll talk about in a moment, Vikings does suck a bit. But then we come to Bono, playing as the Bohemians. Bono, as I say, has not been around anywhere near as long as Brass, but Brass has been here since the beginning. He is the the Aule, the manway of this grand gathering. Yeah, but we come to Bono. Bono is I would say, a player in the middle tier. He's not going to be sitting in feudal age while the rest of us are in imperial or anything like that. But equally, he's going to want to try and ally with Brassidas lest he incur his wrath. Moving down to the south, I've already mentioned Earendel. He's playing as the Spanish. Español. Sí. Give me your vena. Okay. And he is going to hopefully do relatively well. Earendel plays a lot of Age of Empires. He's a staple in most of these diplomacy games. And as the Spanish, and in the safety of the corner, one would hope to see him do particularly well. Spanish are a very good all-rounding civ, and now reasonably useful in diplomacy. But do note, in diplomacy, you don't get your team bonuses. Well, you get your own, of course, but no one else gets your team bonuses. So someone who allies with Earendel while the game's ongoing, Age of Empires isn't clever enough to apply team bonuses on the fly. So people aren't bothered if he's playing in Spanish because they're not going to benefit from it. But he's down in the corner here. Earendel's good, and I would expect him to do very well as well. Moving around, we then come to Mats. Now, Mats is one of the big players here. Brassidas and Mats used to be on a similar par, but I think Mats might just have it now, although Brass will not forgive me for saying that. And Mats is playing as the Vikings as well, which was also why Vikings were just constantly slagged off in the chat of this game, because the two arguably best players in today's gathering, although Griffin again will now be chomping at the bit because I've said that, the two best players got two of the generally considered worst civs for this type of game. Mats settles very quickly, as you can see. He started in a boat over here, and he's built his town centre over here, and he's already stretching his nation right up the middle, claiming every resource that he can possibly get. And his score reflecting that. Mats is expected to win, but the problem with being expected to win in every game is that people then tend to gather up on you and try and rush you out of the game. Sitting next to Mats is Griffin. Griffin is another one. Griffin, Brass, and Mats are the top, I would say, here, but Earendel on a good day could have them as well. So those four, and I'm unfortunately not in that grouping. But away to the east, we have Griffin playing as the Incas. Again, random, and he got Incas from that. He settled immediately, starting in a boat down here. Settled his first town centre just up there. So he's gone straight in to hit what he can hit and gather what resources he can find. Griffin is particularly good, but generally there's a sort of unspoken rule that good players don't ally with other good players. Because again, otherwise the two best players would always ally and they'd always just wipe the floor with everyone. So there's an almost unspoken rule, but everyone kind of goes along with it, that Mats and Griffin are already preparing to not be allies. Now, as the game unfolds, the nature of diplomacy is that the alliances change all the time. People backstab, people side with someone who's stronger than them, people position others in the way of other people to try and survive longer, things like that. And so whilst they probably won't ally first, there's nothing stopping them allying down the line if the situation becomes rather grim. So we'll see how it plays out. We'll see how it goes. Moving around, we then come to Fulgur. Now, this is Fulgur's only second game, I believe, with the diplomacy group, or with just the Discord in general. Forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn there, Fulgur, but I'm sure this is only your second game. Fulgur is an unknown variable in today's game, and we'll see how well he does. But again, he's settled relatively early, and he's arguably in a good position because he's got Griffin to his left, so he could ally with Griffin and ride the coattails of glory that will undoubtedly bring. But he's also, unfortunately, sandwiched between two players, which generally speaking isn't the best place to be. Because even if Knight was the worst player in the game and Griffin was the worst player in the game, being in between two people is still never good. So it's an interesting position Fulgur's in, and we'll see how he handles it. And then away to the east there, and finally we have Knight. Now, Knight is another one who's been around since the very beginning, one of the first ones, although he no longer watches my channel, so he's not my biggest fan. But he's a cracking fellow, and it's always a laugh when he plays. It's always a laugh when he plays. Because Knight is very good at the game, but he requires his full runtime to be devoted to the game in order to really shine. And if his runtime can't be devoted in full to the game, Knight is prone to making what I would consider silly mistakes. But generally speaking, he is one to watch out for. He is going to attack. He is going to do well. He knows the game. You wouldn't write Knight out of it at all. But you can always just probe and just test and just see if some Knight's done something cataclysmically wrong, and then can you make use of it. So something that you'll note immediately in this game is that I have basically the entire north of the map to myself, which is something I don't capitalise on particularly well because I'm rather slow at getting going in these types of games, and this game is no different. But let us go then to a faster playback speed because the game's about 2 in-game hours, which I think is about 1.5 real-life hours. So we want to not sit in the early ages for too long. People just starting to age up now. Well, rather, I'm just starting to age up now. Everyone else is already up at castle, and they're on their way. The battle lines start to take shape. Matt's completely surrounding Eärendil and has started castle rushing him. Now, again, in diplomacy, sort of an unspoken rule that you don't play too aggressively, but there are various players who maybe play fast and loose with that rule with certain other players. So there are grudges from earlier games that come into it, and there are things that are said in the voice chat which spur people on. So even though we're not particularly far into this game, although I've just noted that I haven't got the clock turned on, and I'm pretty sure the button to turn the clock on will mute my voice chat. No, but anyway, we're not too far into the game. I'll get the clock turned on for the next one. We're not too far in, and they're already attacking each other. But Eärendil very much completely sandwiched in that corner, and at the moment, he does not have an ally. But you can see from the military score that Eärendil, Mats, and Knight are the only 3 at the moment who've even bothered with military. Everyone else not doing anything. The key feature about this game that I have completely forgotten to mention is that it is a regicide game, and Eärendil sets up a very cool trigger that when your king dies, everything you own and every unit currently masquerading in your colours is instantly destroyed. So if you can find and kill a king, not only does it beat the player, but it takes their presence completely out of the game. So you can't use like a dead ally to block the advance of someone attacking you, because the ally will just be removed. So the lines are sort of being drawn up. People are starting to find out where they all are, looking at each other. And Bono building away sandwich between Mats and Brass with an interesting barrack stable set up there. Particularly interesting. Brasidas just happily chopping wood away in the north. Playing a little bit slowly, it has to be said, but his score is now starting to ramp up. Mats' score, of course, is growing obscenely, mostly in part to the war that the absolute savagery he's perpetrating on Eärendil. But Eärendil has made it to the Imperial Age, shortly behind Griffin. Griffin preparing a military centre for fear of the retribution. Not retribution, but the fear of Mats is attacking him. Mats is going absolutely all out on Eärendil. I didn't quite realise how absolutely ridiculously aggressive he was at the start of this. It is worth noting that if we just swap again, for these playbacks, it's difficult for me to not do it entirely from my own perspective because, of course, I only know what I was doing in the game, so it's easier for me to recant those tales than it is to see what others are doing. But Mats has upgraded his rams up to capped rams, and he's going to take that castle down very easily. Eärendil desperately trying to counter using his Imperial Age advantage by getting a Treb out, but Mats is also in the Imperial Age and may well have already been. I didn't notice actually when I said Griffin was. Apologise if he already was there. But it's not looking good for Eärendil, is it? He can't really escape. I don't know where his transport ship is miles away. No, I don't think he's getting out of that anytime soon. But Mats has decided to stop with his siege, and he's pulling back, giving Eärendil a little bit of time. Just a little bit of time to move on. And he's building a siege work, so just trapping in. Brasidas then takes to just walling himself in. He and I have no burden with one another, no grief. At this point, I am allied to Mats, but the message that I've just sent there is to Brasidas, saying if you want to ally against Mats, I am game. Because I'm thinking if Mats is attacking Eärendil, we can sweep in and get him now while his back is turned. But Brasidas, alas, has allied to Bono, so the western side of the map has drawn up their lines. In the east, Griffin and Fulgur at the moment, I believe, are allies, with Knight being something of an anomaly out on the edge. Just happily harvesting up all of the resources on his little island over there. Mats and I's base is a little intertwined, but not really. He's got all of this stuff up here, but it's all just it's just Mats being Mats. And stretching out far beyond the realm with which he has any right to stretch beyond. Mats likes to play the game by painting the entire map his colour and then just seeing who is the best bet to ally with him at any given time. But as I say, The problem with being the greatest is that everyone else is gunning for your position. And it's rare that Mats doesn't get absolutely annihilated out of these games. People are feared of him. Fulgur now also made it to the Imperial, and everyone is now finally in the Imperial Age. But the only fighting to be had is here down in between Eärendil and Mats. And Eärendil's got quite a lot of cavalry. They're now the Berserks. Or the Berserk does have a bonus against cavalry, so they're not completely useless against the cavalry. But of course, they're not ideal, but they're better than most other infantry. But there's so many cavaliers there, they are probably going to happily deal with most of those rams. But of course, Eärendil's so trapped in a corner that this is all just buying him time, really. And this is very early doors for him to be killed off. I can't remember if there is a button that turns the timer on. I've turned it off somewhere, but I can't recall if you can turn it on with a button or not. No, for now, we'll just plow on. Oh, yeah, it did that last time as well. All of the UI just turns off randomly when you go into the menu. There we are. Alright, so Eärendil's held off that initial push, but Mats is now just walking villagers through in the ultimate insult. Not even bothered, just strolling them through. Fulgur is building defences, preparing for night, and night is starting to push out. Elsewhere, I'm stretching my lands away to the north and building up defences on that northern side. I've got my monks acting as a scouting party. And trying to harvest up all the relics that I can, although I've got a fair few in my monastery. But the fighting against Mats and Eärendil continues, whilst Brasidas and I hope and pray that we might form an alliance. But no, Brasidas doesn't ally with me yet. Yet. But it comes. Griffin doing his best to shore up basically the entire eastern side of the map and totally surrounding Fulgur. Fulgur is entirely entombed within Griffin's space there. And Night going absolutely mad. How many gold miners are too many gold miners? Never is the reply. All the gold miners. Mats pushes further into Eärendil's base. The ram spam is atrocious. Absolutely disgusting to see. Eärendil really just has no hope here. He can't get the king out because the only way out is across that that shoreline there or across that one there, and there are troops here and there are troops here, so his king is trapped in the town centre. Not a good place to be. As Mats pushes on and applies the pressure. The rams stop making it to the town centre and all the villagers leave, and it is really not looking good. The king, I believe, is dead. Interesting, in the replay, they all slowly get destroyed, whereas in game, it's instant. Everything just immediately disappears. But obviously, in the replay, those triggers go a bit slower. That's very interesting to see. Anyway, Eärendil is now dead. Ah, no, I see. I see. Eärendil is employing the tactic, the fantastic tactic of destroying buildings to try and allow your troops to run away. It's something that I frequently do as well, and dare I even say, I in our diplomacy games, I would suggest I maybe have patented this grand technique, such that people have suggested it's doing a gallo. And in essence, all you do is destroy everything where the enemy army is, so that they have no idea where your remaining forces have gone. You don't leave a trail of breadcrumbs up to where your base is. You just get yourself out, and you leave them to chew away on your rotting corpse while you flee into the unknown. And it usually works a charm, but you will note that Eärendil now has a single town centre. He's gone cap in hand to Bono, who has allowed him to live on that southern edge. But Bono is now just surrounding him with siege workshops, because why not? Whilst he sieges down Mats. So the war between Bono and Mats starts to kick off. Mats is sending nothing really, but their towers and castles are taking umbrage with the presence of the other. Mats is preparing for what I assume is the ultimate attack of Brasidas, and yes, with Mats' attacks on Bono, Bras moves in to defend his stout and noble ally. Battering rams moving in to clear Mats out of that central area, and all four castles up here are now totally trapped. And he's surrounded that one with walls, which suggests to me that there's a real risk that Mats' king is in that castle, but surely not. Surely not. Mats' starting town centre's down here. Why would his king be all the way up there? Unless he moved him away because of fear of Griffin. But I can't see a king in anything else. There's no... Oh, Mats' army moving in on Bono. They're hitting in that southern reaches. And it is... My Magyar Hussars moving through. Only a few. Hardly any. Barely worth mentioning. Magyar Hussars hitting in there and assisting Mats in defense of his base, as I and Mats, of course, are allied. Starting to build military of my own. I'm always very slow to build military. It's my greatest weakness. If someone rushes me, I'm out of the game. I just don't play quickly at the beginning. Well, my cavalry supporting Mats's berserks and trying to push back Brasidas' central line, stopping the incursion across the great river that separates our lands. But the Hussars are down, the berserks are down, and Mats has sort of claimed it for the time, but I'm very concerned that his king really is in this compound over here. And then the sly dogs of war, my diplomats are sent into Brasidas' realm with further offers, further proposals of peace and victory, just as, unfortunately, Bono is getting annihilated. Mats has carved through his land, very little resistance, and Brass sees the writing is on the wall. It is time for the Magyars to side with another Viking in this grand civil war. And I betray Mats. It's worth noting at this point that Fulgur has pulled away to build a second little enclave in the north there. He's put his king in the transport ship, to be sure. Fearful for his life with Knight on one side of the river and Griffin now occupying the entire central span, which is ridiculous. And then Brasidas and I claim alliance. Let's just have a look at who Griffin is currently allied to. And if it is... Oh, I'm used to Griffin being orange. And if it is Knight, or if it's... no, he's not allied to anyone by the looks of it. That's interesting. So none of the three over here are allied to anyone. No, of course, Knight and Griffin are allied. Yes. It's Knight and Griffin that are allied. And... and they've allowed Fulgur to continue to, in essence, exist. Because Fulgur is so new, they didn't want to rush him out. And you'll note that they're preparing their armies to attack me and Brasidas. Eärendil manages to get his king onto the town, out of the town. Why the king is sliding around, I don't know. And the king survives still further. He's out of the transport ship, but alas, Mats's berserks chase him down. Bono's king goes down, and there go all of his buildings. And Mats chasing Eärendil's king to the ends of the earth. They're not letting him go. That is literally all Eärendil has left. No, not quite literally, but in terms of units. But I don't think that king's going to survive. Brasidas and I now fully allied. The castles of Mats have been taken out of the centre. My cavalry hordes are preparing. And unfortunately, Eärendil is scooting over towards Brasidas, who isn't allied to him either. And the king goes down. So Eärendil's gone. Right, so the battle lines are drawn. Griffin and Knight protecting Fulgur away in the east, preparing their assault on myself across the primary river crossing here, where I'm getting some cavalry archers, and we can see Griffin's army, and Knight skirting around the north with his Celtic... Oh, I didn't say Knight was Celts, sorry. Knight's Celts, and they do siege very well, so expect a lot of it. Whilst Brasidas and Mats then come to blows, the war of the two great powers, really. But of course, with Griffin and Knight now shaping up to be allies and Eärendil and Bono gone, it's only a matter of time until the blue and yellow hordes make their way to us. I've got a wall, but it's not really doing anything. But Brasidas has cleared Mats out of that central area. The castle there did go down, so it didn't have the king in. But then Mats is defeated. His king was in that castle there, and his base is gone. Absolutely wiped out in surprise, and I immediately pull my forces north because I've seen the horde. My scouts have been across the river, and I know that there's a horde of Kamyuks waiting. I don't yet know about these fellows, but just then I do find out because I was building more town centres in the north, desperately trying to take up land elsewhere. Yeah, we take down a Woad Raider. Get him! Yes! Knight's siege army. The devastation and destruction caused by that army moving across. But at that moment, Griffin moves across the riverbank, and the fight begins in earnest. I am praying that Brasidas moves through now. I am begging, please, Brasidas, come to my aid. Let's speed this up a little as the first engagement kicks off. There's losses on both sides, but with the then coming Eagle Knights. And then Knight attacks at that moment as well, and it's quite clear I can't hold both back. Horde of siege, absolute mountain of siege. Now there's a lot of decisions in the game that you're going to see today that a micro style player would probably cry at, would maybe scream at the screen. There'll be a few times where you'll see the death of just countless units completely avoidably, and that's a fairly common feature. Knight at the moment very successfully defending his siege onagers with the heavy scorpions rather than using the onagers to take out the cavalry, but in so doing killing themselves. And finally Brassadas's berserk horde arrives. The battle lines are now drawn up against the New River. With Brassadas holding off Griffin in the south, I am then able to focus my attention north and do what I can against Knight. Now I have one real hope of victory here, and that is that Magyar Hussars have a bonus against siege. And if I can use them well enough, we can deal with this siege horde. But of course, it's very, very difficult. It's also worth noting that whilst all of this is going on, all of this fighting is going back and forth, we are pleading with Folger to backstab, to attack one of these fools, to hit them in the back, to stand up and be countered. But he doesn't do that. At the moment, my king is in this town centre over here, and I think Brassadas is in the castle at the back. I don't know where Griffin's king is, and in fact, at no point in the game, I think, do we know where Griffin's king ever is. Or probably in that one, because it's. I mean, I could swap to his viewpoint, but it's such a faff, isn't it? Such a faff. You don't get commentary and viewing like this on any other channel. Oh no. They would take the time. They would show you everything. They would give you stats and statistics. But why revel in the death? And all we see is the constant death. And speaking of death, Knight is not too bothered by it, and he subjects his own men to it frequently. When you have a horde of siege, there's inevitably going to be some casualties, and Knight likes to take that to the extreme. See how far he can really push it. How many of my own men can I kill in attacking my enemies? You will see that we are playing a bit of a yin and yang game at the moment, as Brassadas pushes across the river and takes back the lands that Griffin has claimed here. Knight swoops around in the north, pushing me further and further back. I'm desperately trying to set up a castle in this choke point area and defend my monastery. It's got 5 relics in it. I've got some towers in amongst the houses there because it looks nice, but they don't do anything, and that goes down. I've evacuated every one of my villages of worth away to the west. We're dropping houses as fast as we can. I'm trying to build more farms, trying to just do anything I can do to hold this bloody force at bay while Brassadas plays forward. But then Knight moves his troops in, and Brassadas's trebs go down. Not a good look at all. Losing the impetus, losing the momentum in the assault on Griffin. The Inca Slingers and Kamiyuk combo is pushing itself back against the Berserks quite nicely. Slingers, of course, countering Berserks fairly completely. And Kamiyuks are just a very useful unit, really. I think they're quite underrated because of the range that they have, where more of them can attack a unit than normal. They can bring things down really quickly. But of course, they're slow moving and they can be countered by archers. But this isn't, and at the moment, that's not really a problem. Knight's forces moving into my base now, just completely mopping it up. Things are really not looking good. More and more of my units are just riding to their death in the north. You'll know all 3 of the castles there I were building have been destroyed. My farmers are now the front line. They are in the infrastructure. It is not looking good. It is really not looking good. Brassadas still sending forces to try and defeat Griffin, but the combined might of Knight and Griffin isn't too much for just the horde of Berserks alone, and my forces are desperately trying to hold Knight back in the north here. We managed to kill off a few more of his siege, and Knight's not really filling the void, as you can see. All of his troops are now on the front line, and there isn't really anything coming to support. Whereas, you know, with Griffin and Brassadas, they generally have either their production is right on the front line, so they've got as many troops as they can get already, or they have streams of units generally moving in. But although I say that, Brassadas doesn't really have anything moving through at the moment, but he has got the castles on the front line there. I've got some archery ranges coming up. I've got barracks there for some reason. Magyars don't really do anything in the barracks. My monastery goes down and all 5 of my relics are cast out into the void. I've taken the view now that it's better to, instead of just sending my units piecemeal to die one by one, we should try and group them up into a horde and fight as a horde. Anything that we can use to attack now. If you're unfamiliar with Magyars, we do cavalry archers very well, getting +1, I believe, range and attack on our cavalry archers. And of course our Magyar Hussar doesn't cost any gold, so you need a strong food economy as the Magyars, because they do cost 80 food, which is obviously quite a lot. This is one of those moments I was talking about where there's absolutely terrible micro. And terrible micro, there isn't any micro. And we lose a great deal, but the Magyars do take out all of the siege. We buy ourselves a brief reprieve. Knight so panicked by the Horde's movement that he sent his siege in and has sacrificed quite a few of them. Obviously, they're then killing a few more of my buildings, but Knight's initial force has now been dealt with. We have lost what was my base, but we are now living on. My king is now in that castle there, and Brass, of course, still has the whole western corner secure. Griffin, interestingly, never moves into the south. Nothing if this area ever gets claimed, although Fulgur does, which is quite interesting. But no one's moving down here. No one's taking that space up. We're so focused on the fighting to end this quickly that no one claims the extra land. Griffin continues his attack and now is at the very shores of Brassidas's frontal base. So Brass hasn't actually yet lost any infrastructure. This is the start of his base, with obviously the core being all the way over here. He hasn't lost anything, whereas my farmers are out here bleeding and dying, while Brassidus sits in the corner, stroking the piles of gold that he's gathering up. But of course his forces are doing some dying as well, and we managed to then completely encircle and trap more of Knight's onagers that have come through. And the combined might of our forces, Griffin's army is pushed back by the castles and Brassidas's army. And we're able to hold again in another skirmish that goes our way. I would take the Hussar deaths if the onagers can die any day of the week, because Hussars, as I say, don't cost gold. And on a diplomacy map like this, where the supplies are plentiful, my Hussars can just keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. They do cost a lot of food, but as long as I can chop down trees and build up farms, then they will come forever. Whereas the onagers obviously are very expensive. Now, Knight does have the benefit of having stripped this land of most, if not all, of its resources, bar the wood. But there inevitably will come a time where there's obviously plenty of gold left. You can see there's a huge gold pile there. There's gold in the north still. There is still resources. But there comes a point where you use up your store of resources, and then it becomes drip-feeding units into the fight. So if it isn't decided in an almighty cataclysmic engagement, like with Brassidas, me, and Mats, when we hit Mats, we were able to push through so well with our initial forces, and we were aided by the fact he didn't move his king. But that initial push was strong enough to just do what it needed to do and get him out of the game. Whereas we're at a point now with Knight, where he and we may be able to still gather resources, but whether or not we actually have resources is a different question entirely. And it's interesting to see who manages to manage that financial deficit better. Which one of us does better in the management on that regard? But he's now moving his forces forward. He's built a staging area on the hill in front of my base, and he's taking matters into his own hands and preparing to actually attack from the border rather than send his troops halfway across the map. Griffin, on the other hand, though, taking a bit more of a lackadaisical and lazy type of approach, where he's pulled his forces away. And he hasn't rebuilt the buildings. He didn't build in the space they claimed. And Griffin is now back on his side. And there's a bit of a lull now, which is unusual. And it allows me to get 2 castles up to defend my farms. A monastery goes up, and I've got a monk out shortly who's going to go and gather the relics again. And we prepare again. My Hussars move in just to see if we can't claim a few siege units for free before they get a critical mass. Got to try and harass them. Got to keep the siege onagers from... Got to stop them from getting into a big blob of siege onagers. That's the killer. Brassidas and Griffin still just trading blows back and forth across the river. And Fulgur at the moment still not deciding to get involved. He's got a handful of camels. 10 camels on a villager. And there's a few troops up there as well. His king is in that ship just there. So he's got his king safe. And he's the first to break through to that gold. There is gold similar to that just here as well, which Griffin is cutting his way through. And then Griffin tries to strike up from the northern side, playing a little bit of a sneaky sneak game, but Brassidas is well up to the task and is moving troops around to counter. Knight's secondary horde moving in on my base yet again, preparing for the death and destruction that is certainly and surely and almost assuredly coming. Let's just turn the sound volume down because I'm concerned I'm being massively drowned out and wasting this entire recording. I'm sure it'll be alright. I'm just looking at the sound bars, and when the onagers fire their shots, the sound is definitely about the same level of my voice. It'd be a right bugger if I have to re-record this whole thing. But then if I have to re-record this whole thing, you won't hear me say any of this. Ah, such a shame. Such a shame. This absolute stellar entertainment that I'm currently providing, this top-notch commentary, you're not going to hear any of it. Alright, Knight hits up onto the castle line again. We've got the Hussars dealing with the rams as best we can. I try and tell the castles, when I finally notice, I try and tell the castles not to attack the rams and to attack the onagers instead, because castles are actually not too bad against onagers. Obviously a lot better if you can get garrison forces in them, but the onagers bring down the castle on their own, which is a damn shame. Just as my monk is... He's got 3 left! Leave him alone, you bastards! The monk playing chicken with the siege. And he gets out like a boss. Award that man a medal. Award that man a medal. He managed to save 1 castle, and Knight pulls away in disgrace, in fear, ashamed of what he has done. Griffin sends 4 rams up that southern side, but why, I mean, is anyone's guess. No troops going with them. I've still got some fishing ships in the centre and some houses there, but no one's bothered with them, but that's because they're nothing really. Knight moves in again on a last-ditch attempt and takes out the castle. Things are looking very, very bleak indeed. Griffin and Knight now able to harvest all the resources in the north. The eastern side of the map is entirely theirs, and more of their forces come again. Griffin masses troops on the river edge, on the river bank, and Knight comes again with halberdiers. Finally, all the people watching, desperate that Brasidas and I don't win. People seem to have a little bit of a vendetta against me. I don't know why, but they're very keen for me not to win quite frequently. And people screaming at Knight from behind the scenes, Knight, train some damned halberdiers to protect your siege. And he finally relents and he starts putting halberdiers in amongst the number, because of course my army up until this point has been exclusively cavalry. Although we have got cavalry archers when we have the gold available. We aren't even at a point yet where oh no, sorry, we've only recently started trading, yes. So Brass and I have started trading behind the safety of his wall. And I have a few carts out and more to come. We need to start saving that gold. But you'll note my score is abysmal compared to the other 3. Knight absolutely storming it with the number of units he's killing with all of his siege. But Brass still managing to hold Griffin. And Griffin just sort of not doing very much. I'm not sure what's happening really over there. But we shall see. So let's speed her up again as Knight just clears up those bits and bobs. We don't need to watch as my base dies. I use the opportunity, the reprieve again, to build a horde of Magyar Hussars and cavalry archers. If we are to die, we are to die in glory. And that is what shall happen. I also take the opportunity to run away. My villagers flee south, where we then set up farming over there. I'm desperate for farms because the Hussars cost food, and my farms keep getting raided. They're right on the front line. We can't risk it. And I send my cavalry off just to try and find something, anything that we can see, because if we swap to me and just turn on the fog of war... Oh, no, hang on. I want all visible off and fog of war. Oh, there we go. No, hang on. What am I trying to do here? Why is it not showing me? I don't know. Oh well, a bug in the recording, I suppose. For some reason, I'm able to see Fulgur's base at the moment. All right, let's click on Fulgur and see if it shows me. Oh yeah, there we go. Right, so this is what I can currently see, or Brasidas and I can currently see. And you'll note we don't even know where Knight or Griffin's main bases are. We haven't seen much further in than just their lands there. So we're heading out desperately to try and find something, just to find anything really. Cavalry archers running off, and we're going to go through Griffin's base. I have some Hussars in the north, but they very swiftly get killed off, and we're just trying to find anything we can find. Griffin and Knight combine at this point to send their forces onto that northern side, and I just throw troops in the defense. Just get troops up there to defend. See if we can't just hold them off. I've got my farm in the south now living. They can survive. Griffin hasn't pushed into the south, and neither has Brasidas. More villagers are exodusing, heading out south. And my cavalry archers make it through Griffin's base with hordes of Griffin's forces following, but they aren't able to kill me off. And we find, finally, Knight's base. This is the first we've actually found of it. My Hussars managed to make it around the end, and we're off on a scouting expedition. The cavalry archers are going to sneak through the gap created by the villagers there, because they've cut the trees and not built a wall, so we're able to get through, which is very, very nice. And off we head. More and more of my forces are heading south. Villagers are running away. Everyone is just fleeing. Just get out. My Hussars charge in and are all immediately killed. Although, bizarrely, Knight then takes the opportunity to wipe out Griffin's slingers. I didn't realise he did that. That's almost certainly an accident. They are still allies. Nothing bad was happening there. Knight's moved his production up to the front lines. Oh no, he actually is killing Griffin for no reason. That's something that we did not talk about because I didn't notice this was happening, because at this very moment I'm more interested in watching my cavalry archers. And I was totally unaware that Knight slew Griffin's slingers. What is that about? Just casual betrayal. They're still allied, but for some reason Knight's attack grounding on Griffin's slingers. I don't know if he wants the glory for himself and is telling Griffin to to sod off, or if Griffin's saying to him, kill my slingers please, I need them gone quickly. And then the delete button's faster than that. I don't know what's happening there. But it's not looking good. We've lost the town centre, more villagers being killed. My backup monk, no, the relics. My cavalry archers are still just scouring around Knight's base looking for any building with a flag flying atop it. Anything that we can hope might have a king in, because the situation has turned rather bleak indeed. Rather bleak indeed. Brasidas and Griffin fighting over the central area, but neither making too much headway. Their troops now engaged in a fight there. But my cavalry archers then spy something rather interesting. A town centre with a flag above it. What could this mean? You'll note Griffin has some knights down here, Eagle Warriors. Now, the Eagle Warriors were led away by sheer luck by my Magyar Hussars, who ran through, and the Eagle Warriors followed them. And the army in inverted commas, of how many is that? 29 cavalry archers managed to wipe Knight out, and on the flip of a coin, suddenly the favour is turned. The chance to win becomes ours, and we must now grab it. So at this point, Brasidas and I then go absolutely full on ensuring and doing what we can to kill Griffin. Fulgur at this point still hasn't really joined in this war and still hasn't made his mind up. He's got an army of camels, and we are requesting desperately that he now attack Griffin and we get this over and done with. But Fulgur is easily bought, it would seem. And Fulgur, alas, sides with Griffin, feeling assured that the great might of the yellow horde that stands between Fulgur's base and the front lines of this war will surely protect his people from the oncoming storm. My cavalry archers are killed off in the old remnants of Knight's base, and they don't manage to make it anywhere. And the fight begins anew. Griffin tries to set up forces in the north of my old base, and now Griffin goes what Matt's considered full try-hard. Mats at this point instructs Griffin to try his absolute hardest, and Brasidas and I do what we can to try and move in and strike at Griffin's base. Can we bring him down quicker than Fulgur can make an effect on this war? But Fulgur's camels are coming, and remember, my army is entirely cavalry orientated, and cavalry doesn't like camels. Or rather, horses don't like camels, so we have to see what we can do. But we kick Griffin out of the north there while Brass pushes deep into the central area of Griffin's forward base. But Fulgur's horde arrives, the camels come, and with the two armies combined, we are now hard-pressed to fight them. But my army swings around to the north. Fulgur sends in some camels, but we kite them around with the hussars, and then the cavalry archers bring them down, and then he brings more camels, he brings more from the west, and now we are surrounded, and our first force goes down. It is at this point that Griffin tries to step up his assault. More troops coming up from the south, as you can see, but Fulgur now just flooding in with more and more camels. But we hold off the initial attack, and the battle lines are again redrawn in this central V area, leading down to the relic. Just a fun fact for you, if anyone picks up that relic, the unit that picks it up is immediately killed. So that relic never gets collected. The only people that ever try to take it are newcomers to the map. And Earendel likes to sneak in those little odd, cheeky nods and devices here and there. Griffin has a horde of villagers there doing sod all, and my cavalry archers are now kiting away with Fulgur's force. Fulgur now flooding his full might into the battle. But remember, his battle line his production is miles away. So we have the advantage of being, we're in our home ground, shall we say. So all of Fulgur's forces that are killed off, they have to run across the rest of the entire map to actually then come and do, to resupply his front line. But more camels come in, more cavalry archers to meet them. Cavalry archers do all right against the camels. Of course, the trade between Brass and I is now stepped up to full force. Markets set up in the south, and our trading lines go backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And we pull, or I rather, pull back to this point just here. We managed to get the castle up to distract them. Griffin brings in his Eagle Warriors to support, and now the lines are drawn in the north. Brass managed to clear out a lot of Griffin's force in the centre there, but he's pushed back to the riverbank as well in the defence, and the toing and froing in the centre continues. Brass's Berserk and Arbalist army matching up against the Kamyuk Slinger force that he is met with. And he deals with that force relatively nicely, while I then continue to build forces and train troops and prepare for the onslaught of camels that are coming. My gut instinct here is... Oh, I'm at that point, by the way. I run my king away as well. The enemy is getting much too close for my liking, and so I thought it's time to flee, and I send him south and get the king out. Griffin moves in to support Fulgur's camel with halberdiers of his own, and now my army is entirely countered. And things are looking grim indeed. But I still have these castles to fall back to. There are 4 of them there, and they're not going to fall to Fulgur's army easily because he doesn't have any siege. So whilst the camels might claim the odd building and they wipe out this northern area, they can't really do anything against the castles. And you'll note that Fulgur's now gold supply is running low as he sends his own hussars to try and support his camel hordes. But is it enough, is the question on everybody's lips. Brasidas pushing through to the middle again and then getting beaten back again. But now with the enemy on our doorstep, things take a bit of a turn. Our troops have to focus far more in the defence at home. I managed to get my king down to my town centre though, so he gets away. Brass puts up a wall there to protect. And a castle just over the other side of the riverbank. And at this point, my plan and my thought is very much Fulgur's not getting through these 4 castles. So let's regroup, build our troops behind the castles, and hold. Griffin sends some siege to help, but Griffin's very much having to play 2 parts here. He's supporting his ally with siege of his own, and he's having to push in his own front to push Brasidas back. Brasidas' score now the highest with the number of units he's killed, but Griffin very close behind. Whereas I've got about 10,000 score on Fulgur. And Fulgur completely running out of gold at this point. They are not trading. So there is no passive income. Well, it's not passive, is it? Because you have to have trade. Griffin is trading with Fulgur, but not really in the reverse. So there's no gold coming to the Fulgur's force. And it's hussars all the way. But Magyar hussars are better than her normal hussars, if I dare say so myself. Quite considerably so. Magyar hussar has 105 health, 14 attack at this point with full upgrades, and 3 melee armor. The Hussar has 3 melee armor, but only 11 attack and 95 health. So in a 1-for-1, my Hussar is better, as you'd expect. It's an elite and unique unit version. We try and force again. I'm just desperately trying to hold at checkpoints. It's always going from choke point to choke point to choke point to choke point. And so we put it to this lovely little shooting gallery that's been provided to us. We get as many of the archers as we can using the hill, and we just kill them as they run around the corner. And I'll take that all the day long. Fulgur does have a force in the south now, a base there, but he doesn't really use it. And at this point, Brasidas and I are setting ourselves up to defend the river in the south. Our force being pushed away from our initial base, but reclaiming that choke point again. And moving in again with more hussars and more cavalry archers. My cavalry archers are fantastic, and the only thing really that can counter them at this stage is massed skirms or siege. But neither the Incas nor the Saracens are set up really to do siege, and neither of the players playing them are also either particularly in a position where they can afford the amount of siege they need to counter my cavalry archers. So things like Kamyuks and slingers, and camels to a degree, are no match for the cavalry archer that I can mass up. So I just need to really bank and rely on that. I then moved my Magyar hussars into the gap here and put them on stand, or stood them in the way just so that the archers could shoot. The hussars are completely expendable. The cavalry archers are not. All of the fighting at the moment is taking place here. Griffin is reclaiming gold mining in the centre there, but this central V area is now entirely theirs. But our forces are now starting to push out again. So let's speed up again. I send out the Magyar hussars and the cavalry archers to hit into the north. Let's do some damage, boys. Let's push back. Brasidas moves out across that central line, while Griffin's rally points are still set on the front line over here, so they're ignoring Brasidas' army as it pushes through, but Griffin then finally changes up. But not before his central base there is taken out again. My cavalry goes off on another push, and I send more hussars in, and we go to then try and stop the trade that the enemy is doing, and we are very successful in that, bringing down the market. I also send through some trebuchets, but they are cut down. But 3 of them do make it through, and it now becomes very much a save the trebs. I know that I'm not going to be able to push villagers out and get through Griffin's base, so the plan becomes one of desperation. Can we hope that Fulgur might have made a mistake and that his king is also sitting somewhere silly? That's our only hope at this point. My siege arrives in the corner here to find that there's no one in the castle and there's no one in the towers, which is very, very sad. But I know there's a gap in the wall, and I move the hussars in. We can't see flags flying above any of the buildings within this area, but we set up our cavalry archers to defend, and we see what we can do. But then the hussars spy a ship just off the shore with a flag above it. And yes, that's right. His king is in the ship. And Fulgur goes down again at a minor nothingy raid because he didn't put a gate on one section of his wall. And now Griffin stands alone. He stands alone, but not out yet. Griffin sends a force in the south, desperate to try and do the same thing to us. And I managed to get a castle up before they find my king, and I put him in a castle so that he's at least protected. And then it becomes 2 versus 1. But Griffin has all the map, he has all the space, he has a lot more resources than we do. But he doesn't have any trade anymore. So it's going to be a tough fight for him. His army moves in across the shallows there, but with the cavalry archers and arbalesters, the cameo cord goes down and it dies off. The Griffin, ever the sneaky, brings in more siege in the south desperately to try and get through the gap here. He knows this is where he knows where my king is, because I stupidly blurted out that my king was in the castle. And seeing what is coming across the channel, I run the king away, and we plan a backup. Can we get him to safety? Oh! Griffin desperately now, with no cards left on the table to play, he goes for the one card in his pocket. Can he convince me to betray Brasidas? But at that point, Brasidas and I have fought against all the known world, and I'm more concerned with the life of my king, and I'm not too worried about his message. So, in a true sneaky mode, we hide the king behind the house. Always works a treat. If you're ever in this position, people are always looking for your king to be in a castle. They're looking for flags. They're looking for anything that denotes that he's hiding in something. So if instead you put him somewhere totally, just completely unexpected, like outside behind a house, no one would think that, and they would look over that area, and you have to hope. It's a gamble. It's a risk. Of course, if they are thorough and they wipe out your buildings building by building, they'll find him and they'll kill him. But generally, someone would look at an area like this, completely overlook it, and head off north. And that was my hope. That was my gamble. But Griffin's force in the south is beaten back by Brass, as Brass pushes into his heartland in the north there, and I start to mass troops to go and help. Griffin comes at me in the north there, desperately trying to take the relics from me, the cheeky bastard. I've held those relics for most, if not all, of this game, and I will not allow them to fall into the hands of this great traitor. I deny him his request, and I stay allied with Brass, and we push into Griffin's base. But Griffin isn't done yet. There's one little feather in his cap that he's hoping for, and that is, can he get through and kill one of our kings before we can kill his? And that is the beauty of the kings. All of you at the moment will be watching this thinking, the writing's on the wall. It's 2v1. Griffin is dead. But the beauty of the regicide and the way that it works by destroying all buildings means that if Griffin can get a raid into our base with the hordes of resources that he still has, if he can push in and get a successful raid on us while we're distracted, while we're attacking somewhere else, he can totally level this to a 1v1, and then he fancies his chances. So can he do it? So let's speed it up. Griffin amassing troops in his base, in the safety of his base, while Brass moves north and hits from that northern side. My army going all the way round. I'm thinking of the same thing. I'm thinking, can I kill his king now? Let's get this over quickly. I've got 10 trebs. I've got 2 sets of cavalry archers. I've got 2 sets of hussars, although the others come through a little later on. They're massing there. And I'm going to try and sneak round the back and see what I can do to find his king. I think his king is in that castle there, right at the back of his base, very in the arse end of nowhere, if you will. But this is the gamble. Griffin takes to the waters, on completely in the knowledge that we will not have any naval defences, because he's scouted our base. He's attacked across the river a number of times. We've put the walls up, so we're thinking there's no way he's going to come without us learning about it. We'll be warned he's attacking. We're good. Our forces move in the north. We're just going to slowly eradicate Griffin from the map. And Griffin's navy sets off. The ships sail, sea laden with siege ram upon siege ram. They stop off to pick up even more, although no, they're going to make those ones walk. And through they come, landing in my shores. I'm the weak link. No! And the horde of elite eagle warriors floods out into our domain, and off they go, desperate in search for the king. You see, he's just done exactly what I just said. He ran through my base looking for a sign of a garrison flag. He didn't see one, and there's no way to trick garrison flags, so he's off. Griffin absolutely could have just killed my king, but because I put the king in a stupidly obvious position that no one would think of, he couldn't get to him. But he's going to push through. He's going to go for brass. The siege rams stop and then dally on my base and start taking down the castles and the houses and whatnot. And Griffin's eagle warrior horde finds what he thinks is Brass's king. And the race is on. He goes for the town centre first. No king in there. Nothing doing. He then starts going for the trade. He loses focus entirely. He's desperate for the king to be anywhere but in there. Brass brings berserks back to deal with it, and Griffin's last hope, unfortunately, dies with his eagle warriors. He finds the king and then decides that he can't destroy the walls in time. Runs off to try and deal with trade, and by that point, we've dealt with the force in the south. Troops have moved south to deal with that. Our hordes still push into Griffin's base in the centre there. We've now cleared him out of the north entirely. He sends more and more and more forces south, desperate to get them into ships. I then also put some siege onagers up against, or normal onagers, sorry, up against the cliff line to try and kill the rams. I can't let them, although I'm giving away massively where my king is now, but I couldn't let them get through to the king. It's a gamble, as I say, but it pays off. And Griffin's horde is killed. Another market is put up. We rebuild. The horrors of war are forgotten. He sends more ships through, but they're killed. They are killed. And then the petards come through, but we kill them as well. And with that, Griffin concedes. And the game is won. And that was the diplomacy. And another win for Galu. Thank you very much. And let's have a look at the statistics then. So score-wise, Brasidas took the top spot in the end. Militarily, economically, and in terms of total score. Technology, there's a new word for you. Technology and Societe are both to Griffin. That's 7-4 for 1. The numbers don't mean anything. But Griffin had the highest in tech and highest in society. Going through in military, Brasidas killed 3,011. Interesting that Griffin and I actually had almost similar kills, but then that would be because I was fighting against Knight's ridiculous Soviet tactics. Although in this case, as you can quite clearly see, the Soviet award goes to Griffin with 3,619 units lost. That's obscene, Griffin. Absolutely obscene. He's probably not watching to this point in the game, but anyway, that's obscene, Griffin. Units lost, Aorendo lost the least, but unfortunately that star just means you died first. In about 99% of the times you see that star next to your name, it means you died first, and it's no different here. Although he did convert a unit, which is quite funny. Matt's destroyed the most buildings, though, interestingly. Knight 1 building behind, that's crazy. And Griffin at 104, so up there as well. The largest army went to Griffin at 293. Brass, for example, only had 155, and I was at 234. So I was second largest, but then of course I survived longest, so it's likely I would. Economy-wise, Griffin across the board, save for trade, which was me, got a lot of gold through trade. I ran out of gold very quickly, and I was desperate for it, so I went all in on trade, and that's how I managed to obtain that. But otherwise, Griffin, through the longevity of his survival and the amount of land he owned, ensured that he controlled that central line. Griffin getting to the feudal age first, Matt's into castle, and then Griffin into imperial quickest again. That's some of the numbers. Don't bear looking at. Don't worry about that. Although me and Brass are a second away from each other. That's interesting. Research count. I actually researched more than Griffin, but the reward for getting up to the ages first and having 90% of the map explored is more of a bonus. That's why I got the highest score in that. And turning to castles, 29 castles by Griffin. 11 for me, 15 for Brass, and 13 for Mats. Absolutely ridiculous. Relic gold, Brasidas had the highest, despite my having all of those relics. I had 6 relics at the height, but Brasidas got the relics quicker, and that's why I had the gold. And of course, for a long period of time, my monastery was in ruins, and then the monks aren't too keen on sending their gold tithes back to the crown when they are currently sifting through the ruins of their personal belongings and the walls that once housed them. So I can understand. And then timeline-wise, Earendel unfortunately not factoring in today, which is very rare. Earendel normally wins. Actually, I think Earendel has the highest win percentage of all of us. I don't think anyone would contest me on that. He wins a lot. He's very sneaky, and because he designs the maps as well. I mean, it's definitely a conspiracy going on here. He designs the maps. He always goes to the best place. He ends up winning. Colour me surprised. Knight, hordes of units, but then obviously dying and immediately disappearing. Griffin having a large chunk of units for most, if not all, of the game. Fulgur had a nice little river there. Then he finally ramped up his military production as we get to the last third of the game. 2 hours and 34 in-game minutes. But in-game is 1.7 times that of real life, which means, of course, that it is not that. It is much shorter than that. Let's actually just work it out for a change. 82 minutes. So it was 1 hour and 20 minutes of real life time this game took. And there's your timelines for you. And that is it. So I hope you have enjoyed this. Obviously, this doesn't give you a sense of the fun that we actually have playing these and the chat that we have while the game's going on. Because we don't segregate ourselves off into rooms for diplomacy. So all 8 of us are in there talking crap to one another. We're desperately trying to lie to each other while we're doing things. That's a very common feature. You tell someone you haven't got any troops while your army's moving behind their base. It's such a fun game mode when people really get into it. And if you're interested in playing, do just come along to the Discord. Go when you arrive at the Discord in the server chat. You can tick an emoji to say you want the Age of Empires tag, and then we post. Generally, we play at weekends. It's a bit sporadic. Sometimes we'll go 2 weeks and not play, and then other times we'll play every day of a weekend. But we play a lot. And if you want to play, just come in and let us know. And if you really want to play and you haven't played, send me a message, and the next time I play, I'll message you first so that you have a chance to get in, because of course it's capped at 8 people. But I hope you've enjoyed this Diplo. The next Age of Empires videos I'm going to bring you are my replays of the tournament that we did. So they won't be as fast and loose. They'll be shorter for one, and they won't be like Diplomacy. They're standard team games, and I'll show you my escapades first, and if you'd like to see more, then I can do that afterward. But for now, that's your lot. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Do leave me any feedback that you want to leave me. Do let me know your thoughts. If you want to play, come and play, but otherwise, watch out this weekend, or stay tuned this weekend for the live stream for the Reunited Kingdom in the wake of Aragorn and Gandalf's deaths. But if you're not watching this live when it came out, then just have a great time in the future, and you do you. And until then, Navair na den Pedamad Melonin, and farewell.